Hey folks, Steve here with a special review video for you today. We're going to be taking a look at The Dark Summer, Normandy 1944, a game designed by Ted Racer and published by GMT Games. This review comes at the end of a series of videos that I played a full game playthrough for. This review is based on technically two playthroughs. One that ended very early because I wasn't playing well as the Germans and had to restart, and then a full game um, from turn 1 to 10 where the Germans still lost, but at least it was a little more competitive. If you're really interested in seeing that playthrough in detail, that's available on the channel, so you can check that out. You can watch all the videos and get a closer, in-depth look at the game and the way that game played out. But if not, hopefully this review will inform you on whether or not this game is worth your time, something that you might be interested in or not. So the way I usually structure these is we'll take a sort of the middle part of the video will be dedicated to looking at the game in close detail and talking about the mechanics and the way the game works. If you watched all those other videos, you probably don't need to watch that. And I will show you in the cut here coming what the timestamp you can skip to if you just want to view the rest of the review, what I thought of the game, how it compares with others, and my sort of final thoughts on that. So you can skip that. If you don't want to sit through all the playthrough videos, then this next part of the video will be valuable for you to understand the way the game works and some expectations for that. I will say, so far I'm a fan of the Dark System, so for me, this was a fun time, but there's some nuance to that that we'll get to later in the video. So yeah, why don't we switch it over to that in-depth look? Again, the timestamp, which will show on screen, will tell you where to go if you just want to skip to the end. So let's take a look. Okay, let's take a look at the game materials so you guys get a good sense of what the game actually looks like. Obviously, pictures are available elsewhere. You can see the map is of Normandy. There's a little bit of controversy, I guess, that exists because not all of the Cotentin Peninsula is displayed here. So Cherbourg itself is not on map. The peninsula kind of goes off here, and there's a box that represents units that are in and around Cherbourg itself. This was a intentional design decision from Ted Racer to fit the game on one map, to have Cherbourg involved, but to also allow for all the other activity that occurred towards Falaise and Alencon and Enfranchet, um, towards the Brittany region, so that you have a deeper campaign than just what happened in the month of June. The game actually runs from June to July and August, so there's a lot more activity that Ted decided to display in the game than just if we included Cherbourg, then maybe the map would only show like that by comparison, and you'd have a bunch of wasted map space for the water where we are afforded a wider or deeper inland map for additional maneuvering and activities. So that may rub people the wrong way who really want to see Cherbourg on map and actually play through all of that. Maybe someday in C3I they'll publish an extension map so you can play it that way if you really wanted to. But I don't know that it's needed. I think the Cherbourg box works okay for what it needs to do. There's also the Brittany box. This represents if the Americans can get down to these hexes, they go off map, or can go off map to the Brittany box, which also allows them to reappear later through these S marked hexes on the other edge of the map and sort of outflank the Germans. That occurred in my game playthrough. And then there are eastern exit hexes over here where ultimately units are going to seek to get there and go off map, and you can accrue victory points for that. The map comprises of a lot of different types of terrain. So there's obviously clear, there are rivers, there are major rivers that pose problems for mechanized forces to move across. They need bridges to do so. There are major roads, there are minor roads, and those have an effect on how quickly you can move. But you can see there's the bocage, the hedgerows, terrain type. There are forests, there are woods, there are hills. So there is a variety of different terrain that you'll be fighting across, and your positions and the way you've set up your defenses will be predicated a lot on the terrain that they're in. So all of that pretty standard fare for the game, the actual gameplay that you would expect to see. Now I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to talk about a few important game mechanics as we go. So the beginning of the game will start with the actual beach landings. So not a huge surprise on how that will probably work. The very first actions of the game, and I've sort of reset up the beginning so you guys can see by way of illustrative example. The allies will have starting units that their setup hexes that they start in are these light blue hexagons that are off the coast. And there's first wave, second wave, and then some labeled third wave. The way it works is at the very beginning of the game, certain action chits are used where the units that are in these first wave hexes will conduct combat on the beach hex, which are held in place by these strong point markers or strong point units. Now you can see there's a question mark on there. Like many hex encounter games, the combat factors are the first number on a unit, and then there's a movement factor as the second number. Some units have three numbers, so in typical fashion, the first number is the attack factor, second is a defense factor, and then the third is the movement. But you have these strong point units. You also have these battalions. So they're question mark because you don't know what the combat strength is. At the beginning of the game during setup, all of these strong point markers are mixed up face down or however you want to do it to randomly be placed on all the spots that have these markers to show where they get set up. So you have this replayability factor where the strengths will be different when you play. Each time you play, there's the different possibility of what those values will be. So when the attack occurs, you actually flip this sucker over, and we see that this particular unit is just a one value strong point, but to represent the strong defenses of the Omaha Beach structures, or the defenses at Omaha Beach, the hexes that comprise it get a special little marker that add additional combat factors. So right now, this hex actually has a combat strength of 4. So the attacking units, you do the comparison on the CRT, you roll the dice, and then the allies will advance into the beach. Maybe a little bloodied if they took a step loss. Maybe they're just fine and dandy, but that's part of how you play the first turn. They have these Ost battalions that are very similar. There's a question mark strength. They can move. They have a 4 movement, but you don't know their strength either until they're involved in combat. And in this case, this is also a 1 strength unit, so pretty weak. The map includes places, little notations as to where those Ost battalion markers need to be set up. So the basic structure of the game, in terms of the big scheme of things, will be the allies, both the British and the Americans, landing at their beach hexes, fighting past or the initial defense, and the Germans doing what they can to contain the breakouts, contain the beaches, while they get more reinforcements on. And at the very beginning, like in this sector of the map, you have some flak that's relatively weak. You have the Ost battalion. You have this guy who's not terribly strong. But over the course of the game, you will have stronger German units come onto the board at the map edges, so it takes them a little while to get to the front lines at first, but they will enter. And you'll sometimes get very strong mechanized SS units. So here's an example, the 9th SS, which comes in at the south border of the map on turn 3, a few turns in, which is quite potent, quite strong. You can see a total of 20 combat factors on attack, and then 26, 26 on defense. So quite strong altogether. This unit can come in and forms a much better force to contend against the Americans. And you also have like the 12th SS, which is even stronger with, let's see if I can pull back, 6, 8, 10, 12, 10, 12, 10. So, the Germans will be looking to use these much stronger units as they can reinforce onto the map to actually contend with the Allies and be much more capable of doing so. But again, it takes time. They're going to come in later in the turn, so the Allies are really trying to gain as much ground, get into the best position possible by the time the German reinforcements come into play and actually get involved in the combat. Now, all of this stuff, movement, combat, are going to follow pretty common uh, rule mechanics, right? You're moving from hex to hex. Each hex costs a certain number of movement points based on the type of terrain. Combat is with ratios, so you add up all the attacking factors, you compare it to the defending factors, you get a ratio, you roll the dice, you get some results in the CRT. All that's pretty straightforward stuff. Now, there are some differences from other Dark Series games where there's this mandatory attack rule where if you're going to do a multi hex attack, if there are units in the zone of control of some of your attacking units that aren't being attacked, you will have to attack those units with either other units of your own, um, or you just settle on using a single hex attack. So how does that really work? Well, let's say we have some American units here, and we're set up like so. Let's just set up these divisions like this. So in this example, you could not have all of these German units, these two stacks, attack this hex because there's another American unit in this hex's Zoc. It has to be attacked too. Now you can decide how you want that to go. So you could have 3 units in this hex and 2 units in this hex attack these guys, and then have one measly unit attack this whole stack. Now, that's probably not a good decision to make, but that is how you make that work. These guys have to be attacked if you're trying to do a multi-hex attack here, because you're sort of like pinning, these guys aren't doing nothing while you're attacking here to here. They have to be addressed some way. Um, there are other Ted Racer games that use this mechanic, but I think this is one of the few Dark Series games that implements this mechanic. So it's something you have to kind of wrap your head around. It makes sense when you understand what it's portraying, but it is something that is easy to forget, and you might get wrong the first couple times you play. Now, if you're not familiar with the chit pool system of the Dark Series, the way all of this works is that during a turn, there will be a set of activation markers that will go into a cup. Technically, not this guy, but we'll talk about that in a second. Um, and I'm not showing the British markers, which would be part of the group as well. But just by point of example, the Americans have some chits, the Germans have some chits. Some of these have 2 sides where the player can pick what they want to have happen. But if you draw this chit from a cup, um, you will then play whatever that listed action is. So you could get a chit and have it be a move, so you get to move all of your units, or you do combat and have all of your units conduct combat, right? Pretty straightforward stuff. The chit pool means you might get things out of order. You might get a combat chit that comes up, and your units are not really in a good place to do an attack. That can happen. That's sort of the luck factor of the chit pool and having to plan as best as possible all the time. The one innovation or change that this game has across other Dark Series games is that there is a weather component. A weather component that is not simply tied to what turn it is. What you have is a separate cup to pull chits from, and inside that cup will be these weather markers, and you'll get stuff like sun, cloud, showers, rain, storm, and these markers will be what the weather is for that whole turn, which usually equate to about a week. So for that week, it's going to be stormy. For that week, it's going to be showers or sun. There are different weather effects that affect movement in combat. So on sunny turns or nice weather turns, the Germans are interdicted and they can't use road movement. Where on stormy turns or rainy turns, they can use road movement, and the Allies have fewer air resources to pull on. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. But the other important thing is that between these different weather situations, what chits go into the cup will change as well. So on a sun turn, the Americans are going to get 4 chits, the Germans will get 3, and they'll get 1 reaction marker, which they can use to interrupt the chit pull sequence to move 1 division, basically, of units in response to something that the Allies do. So sunny weather is bad for the Germans. That's all they get. But if the weather was instead storm, then what you might have is that the Americans only get 2 activation chits. The Germans get their 3, and then they actually get additional reaction markers, more than just the one that they would get on a sun turn, which means that the Germans are going to be going a lot and have much greater flexibility. Now, the thing about these chits are that you will use all of them, but it's the order that you don't know. So the German knows they're going to get a storm turn. The Allies know they're going to get some sunny and cloud turns that are good for them, but you just don't know what order it will be in. So there's that uncertainty and making the best of the situation that you get. So again, there's some replayability there, um, some unexpected things that, just at the right time, the right weather can come up or the wrong weather could come up, and you have to deal with the consequences of that. And that's really the big stuff. Now, there's a few special rules about Cherbourg where the Germans will defend there. The Allies will seek to isolate it and then conduct a special form of combat in Cherbourg that uses its own CRT. It is very attritional in nature, but it is a major facet of the game for the Allies to contend for Cherbourg and for the Germans to delay Cherbourg being taken as long as they can. That all factors into the victory point. So, assuming you don't reach some automatic victory, there are ways to get victory points. Some of them are time-based. Some of them you look at the end of the game to see. Some of this comes down to, again, getting units off to the eastern exit boxes and sort of like, pulling back from Normandy. So it's, you know, the whole gameplay, encompasses landing at the beaches, the Germans trying to slow the Allies down, the siege of Cherbourg, or the Cherbourg campaign, the race to the Brittany ports, avoiding being encircled by the Allies as the Germans, and then finally everyone pulling east to what will eventually be the West Wall situation, later in the year. So all of these factors kind of play together, and probably more than any other Dark Series game, there is this feeling that you're smack dab in the middle of a lot of action, and there are these things happening sort of off map that really matter, and it's this very unique aspect to the game that shows itself that you're worried about the map edges in a very different way than other games in the series. But that's the basic way that the game flows. Um, One other thing I'll just point out, and I think I meant to point this out a minute or two ago, that over time the German reinforcements will not be as good. So you'll get units like this that are 3, 4, 6s, and then eventually you'll get units that are like this, which are 2, 3, 6s. They're just not as good. So there is this sort of, the Germans have a finite number of resources to pull on in terms of units and manpower to operate. Um, but the game, really focuses in on those important axes of advance. Where do the roads link up? Are you taking these cities? Are you getting across the river? Um, all of that comes together pretty well for the way the game actually plays, and it flows in the decision making that you have. Again, some things are outside of your control, like the weather and the chit order, but then you're really trying to prepare yourself at each step that you're activating units for the future, and kind of fighting through the chaos. And it's all pretty interesting the way that plays out. Now, I don't think I need to get too much more into the mechanics. I think that's a really good high level description of the way things operate. Again, if you really want to see stuff in more detail, you can check out the playthrough series where we went through all of this in relatively good detail on how the game plays and the victory points and the strategies along the way. And some of my sort of takeaways from that we'll talk about here as we talk about the final thoughts and review portion of the video. But yeah, this should be good. Let's get it back to that last part of the video then. Okay, so what did I think of the game? Well, probably not surprising to say that I had a good time with it. It was a fun game. So far, every game in the Dark series has been a lot of fun. Well-made game. The components were all pretty high quality. The player aid sheets were useful and good. I didn't really see any obvious areas of improvement for the player aid sheets. The map is clear and everything works pretty well. The game mechanics all function well. The rules were easy to read and learn, and it all came together quite well, for sure. And I'll say that, like each game in the Dark series, this game is quite unique. It's not a previous Dark game with a new coat of paint on it, and it's just the same game, only slightly different. It is substantively different in terms of the weather chits and the overall cadence of the game, and the extra mechanics and things you have to worry about with the shareboard box, and the Eastern exit box and the Brittany box. And in fact, if you look at any other game in the series, they don't have any of these sort of boundary mechanics where the Dark Valley is about getting the victory cities and shutting Germany down as the Soviets. The Dark Sands is about outmaneuvering and getting to the edges of the map, but once you're at the edge of the map, the game is kind of wrapped up. Where this game, it is such a different thing to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my units to the Brittany box, and they're going to wrap around, and how does that work? So there's just a whole bunch of like unique gameplay aspects within the series that this game offers, and for sure, from a solitaire perspective, the game is a lot of fun, and I really liked it. So, I mean, in terms of like, how much I liked it, I mean, it's definitely up there. We're talking 8, 9 out of 10 kind of thing. If you like those sorts of ratings, I always feel weird about the number ratings. Really great solitaire experience. It was fun. It was tough to figure out what to do. The chits came up. You reacted. You tried to figure it out. Now, there's a little bit of nuance that I need to explain in that, as a solitaire game, it worked great. As an opposed game, I do wonder how it will go, because this is the first Dark Series game where it's kind of weird to think about. I guess this is the first time. In all the other games, like the Dark Valley, the Germans are on the attack. Eventually, the Soviets are on the attack. In the Dark Sands, it goes back and forth. In this game, the strategic initiative and the sort of aggressive posture is basically always in the Allies' camp. And so the German player is constantly on the defensive. Even if they have the potential to do some counterattacks, it is always falling back or reconfiguring your line, and you're just doing a lot of that. Which, if you're playing an opposed game and the German player is in that position, it might not be as fun, especially if they like to play offensively. Now, the game is short enough. I think, all told, this probably would take, around the 10-hour or less, maybe 8 to 10 hours. Just depends on the game flow and if you and your opponent are familiar enough with the rules. It doesn't take a long time to play, so you could probably, play through and then swap sides and play through again. It's just that whoever is playing Germany is going to be stuck with that defensive mode of operation the whole game. Now, this isn't a unique problem for the Dark Summer amongst Normandy games. I think any Normandy game is probably going to have a lot of that. And it reminds me a little bit of Fall of the Third Reich, a recent, a game I did recently, a review for, from Ted Racer. It's just the conflict. It's not the game's fault. It's, hey, if you're going to do a Normandy game, it's just going to be this way. Sort of the same with, an invasion of Italy game, as the Allies. The Allies are going to be on the offensive. The Axis will be on the defense for the majority of all of that. And if that doesn't sound entertaining, then that might be a problem for you. Again, it's not the game's fault. It's the conflict it's portraying, and you just sort of have to accept that facet of it. There's no avoiding it. So that would be my one sort of warning on it for that reason. Now, if you're just playing solitaire and you're doing the chit pull thing, then it's just fine, right? You're just playing both sides. It's fun to see how the game plays out. You're playing to the best of your ability in either case. It's okay from that perspective. You have a good time. I had a great time with it. It really was. I think the special rules, the beach landings, all offered some fun, and different stages of the game as it unfolds makes for a very dynamic campaign, right? You're not doing the same thing all the time. You're getting on the beaches, you're trying to get across the river, and then you're trying to siege and take Cherbourg as the allies, and you're trying to push for Brittany, and all these different things are going on that you're trying to achieve, and that is pretty fun. Like there's variety in the goals that you're trying to achieve across the campaign of the game, the 10 turns. So quite good from that experience. Now, how it rates against other games in the series, it's really tough to say. Now, I think my favorite in the series is probably still the Dark Valley because it is so epic and it's so big and there's so much going on with it. I think the Dark Sands is also very good, and I think just maybe what helps the Dark Sands is that the Allied player is on offense, and then the German player is on offense, and then the Allies are on offense, and so you get this back and forth thing where both sides get to enjoy that offensive mode of operation. And here, because you lack that for one side the whole time, I could see that maybe being why this would be a little bit lower on the totem pole. But don't let that dissuade you if you want a fun Normandy game that works well for solitaire. I think this is a great game. It is a great game. And when you're talking about Titans, which Titan is the best? Well, it gets kind of hard to really say, right? But I definitely had a good time with this one. I'm glad I picked it up. It came at a good time because I'm playing a lot of other Ted Racer games, so it came in, and it was really well put together, well put together game. So far, the errata looks very minuscule, minor, very minor. So they managed to get this one out, and it just is awesome as is. No additional player aids are needed. I like that. It just everything you needed really was available to you for the most part. The only thing I would say as an improvement would be if you had a little cheat sheet to protect or not protect to help explain the asset markers. That's something I kind of skipped over in the middle part of this video. There are asset markers. There are markers that the Germans can use and that the Allies can use. The Allies get a lot of air asset markers. The Germans get some artillery and some tank destroyers and some stuff. Assault guns. The thing about that is that some of those asset markers are only usable in certain weather or in certain circumstances, and it might have been nice to have a little cheat sheet. And I don't think there's anything like that on any of the player aid sheets, and that would be one improvement area. And it would only be a little summary that would suffice for that, but that would have been the one little enhancement maybe that could have been made. But ultimately, that's small stuff, and the game, I think, as printed, it is pretty damn rock solid. So yeah, guys, it was good. I mean, what can I say? I'm waiting for a Dark Series game to come out that is not good. I'm not sure it's going to happen at this point. I mean, we're if you count the whole Dark and Deadly family, we're like 4 for 4. And if you count Case Yellow, I still have to do Case Yellow. That might be the cousin furthest from the family tree that I would probably include in the family. I've got to put that one through its paces too and see how it compares to the rest. But so far, they've all been really great, and I would definitely recommend them. You can laugh about the Dark moniker for this series, but Ted's putting out some really enjoyable games, and if they keep making them, I'll keep buying them, I guess. The next one, if it is the Dark Seas, which is a Pacific war in the Dark system, I think it'll be really interesting and see how that compares to things like Empire of the Sun or Fire in the Sky, these other sort of strategic Pacific games, and see, is the chit pull mechanism appropriate for that? Does it make for a good game? I mean, you could have maybe applied that same question to any other of the topics that the Dark Series covered, and it's done well so far. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review video. I hope it is useful to you. It's a recommendation, so check it out and take a look. And if it looks interesting to you, I would recommend it. We'll probably cover more Dark Series in the future at this rate, so stay tuned here. I've got a big old playlist of all of my Dark Series coverage, so you can take a look at that playlist on YouTube, and you can watch anything and everything related to the Dark Series that I've done in terms of coverage. If you want, it's all there for you. And until next time, guys, take care. keep on gaming.